These are 10 rock songs from 1969 that missed mainstream success at release, but went on to reshape entire genres of music. While attention stayed fixed on Abbey Road and Woodstock, these tracks quietly set the foundations for punk, prog rock, electronic music, and heavy metal. Contradictions defined 1969. The moon landing lifted spirits. Protests against the Vietnam War grew harsher. Woodstock promised peace in August, and the Charles Manson murders tore through that optimism. In music, Bob Dylan returned with Nashville's Skyline as the Beatles prepared their final act, yet something just as radical was unfolding off the radar. What follows are 10 songs that changed everything, beginning with a track that invented punk rock before the genre had a name.
I have people here by tonight.
Number 10. The Stooges. I Wanna Be Your Dog. Ann Arbor, Michigan produced a strange band of dreamers in 1969, and that group released a song that would define rebellion for the next half-century. I Wanna Be Your Dog never charted nationally, the album barely moved units, and none of that hinted at what this 3-minute blast of distortion and sleigh bells would become. The result was a blueprint for punk rock. Years later, Iggy Pop described those early days without romance, explaining that the Stooges were not empowered, just a far-fetched group hoping to have a small rock band while people laughed at them. That context matters, because the song itself grew from simplicity rather than theory. Words landed on top of Ron Asheton's guitar riff, and Pop wanted the biggest idea he could imagine without singing about God. Flipping the word backward gave him dog, and that inversion became the core of the song. Meaning came later, and when Pop explained it to Howard Stern, he kept nothing vague. He described seeing a well-dressed woman walking her dog, the physical closeness between them, and the raw urge to unite with a body without conversation, judgment, or artifice. That blunt instinct sat at the center of the song, and audiences in 1969 did not know how to process it. Live performances turned uncomfortable fast. Pop remembered playing it while people stared in horror, and on other nights, they simply drank their beer and watched, unsure what they were seeing. The sound felt abrasive, and mass appeal never arrived. What followed instead was influence. Early heavy metal and punk took its shape from that riff, a 3-chord loop of G, F sharp, and E that never lets up. John Cale added a single-note piano line that pushed the track into a hypnotic space, and underground scenes picked it up immediately. Covers came from Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Devotion from Nirvana, and Respect from Sonic Youth, the White Stripes, and R.E.M. Sid Vicious even recorded it for his 1979 debut. Recognition arrived slowly, and by 2004, Rolling Stone placed it at number 438 on the 500 Greatest Songs list, then raised it to number 314 in 2021, while Pitchfork ranked it 16th among the best songs of the 1960s. Only 3 studio albums came from the Stooges between 1969 and 1972, and commercial success never showed up during that original run. By the time the band entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010, Pop had the clearest proof that the song survived because crowds now knew every word. Number 9. Frank Zappa. Peaches on Regalia. As the Stooges rattled audiences, Frank Zappa worked quietly at TTG Studios in Hollywood on something nobody had heard before. July 28, 1969 marked the basic tracking date for Peaches on Regalia, a 3.5-minute instrumental that would echo through rock history. The track appeared on Zappa's second solo album, Hot Rats, one of the first records to use 16-track recording through a custom prototype built at TTG. That technical leap mattered, because it allowed layers and textures that simply did not exist on earlier systems. Zappa described the process years later, explaining that the piece began as a set of chords scribbled on paper and recorded by a 4-piece group. Melodic lines arrived one at a time in the studio, sometimes played by Zappa himself and sometimes overdubbed by Ian Underwood, which made the composition grow organically rather than follow a fixed score. Initial response in the United States fell flat. Across the Atlantic, the story changed, as the song reached the top 10 in both the UK and the Netherlands. Categorization never fit, because the music sat somewhere between classical, jazz, and rock, blended without apology. Modal scales drive the song, mainly B-Dorian, paired with irregular rhythms and syncopation. Despite having no vocals, it became one of Zappa's most approachable works, and attempts to add lyrics failed repeatedly. In 1975, he admitted he had never managed to write words that worked with it. Years later, he told American Songwriter that when people named their favorite Zappa track, Peaches on Regalia appeared alongside Mudshark more often than anything else. Influence followed quickly. Pete Townsend drew from it for the organ parts on Won't Get Fooled Again and Baba O'Reilly, Mike Oldfield built toward Tubular Bells from the same ideas, and the song entered the underground version of The Real Book, a rare badge of respect among jazz musicians. The BBC used it as the theme for One Man's Week in the early 70s. Grand Theft Auto 4 featured it in 2008, and in 2009, Dweezil Zappa's band won a Grammy for their instrumental version. 50 years after its creation, December 20th, 2019, brought the release of the Hot Rats Sessions, a 6-CD box documenting its evolution. Number 8. Mother Lode. When I Die. Not every hidden gem disappeared because it challenged listeners. Some vanished through timing and poor business decisions, and Mother Lode's When I Die shows exactly how that happens. In 1969, the song reached number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100, climbed to number 12 on the Cashbox chart, and in Canada it hit number 1 for 2 weeks in August. More than 500,000 copies sold, and Billboard ranked it the 71st biggest song of the year. Success like that raises a simple question, because the song still lives in obscurity. The answer arrived quickly when the band broke up in December 1969, only months after the hit peaked, and Vanguard Records failed to distribute or promote the record properly outside Detroit. Mother Lode did not come out of nowhere. William "Smitty" Smith handled keyboards and vocals, Steve Kennedy played sax and sang, Ken Marco covered guitar, and Wayne Stone sat behind the drums, all seasoned by Toronto's R&B scene. Work backing David Clayton Thomas before Blood, Sweat and Tears, and driving Grant Smith and The Power prepared them before forming Mother Lode in 1969. Sessions included Carol Kay from the Wrecking Crew on bass and acoustic guitar, and the album sleeve thanked her directly for the feel, the drinks, and her playing. The song itself blended smooth soul, gospel harmonies, and pop polish into something immediate and warm. Ownership disputes complicated everything. Revolver Records controlled the band name, which led to multiple reformed lineups after the original members moved on to Dr. Music in Toronto. Over time, the song earned a SOCAN award for more than 100,000 radio plays and appeared on Oh What a Feeling, a defining Canadian music compilation. Jay Dilla sampled it on Donuts, his final album, and many listeners now recognize the melody through that later reinterpretation rather than the original recording. The story ends where it began, with talent meeting opportunity and losing to the business side of music. Number 7. Terry Riley. A Rainbow in Curved Air. Anyone who has spent time with electronic, ambient, trance, or progressive rock has crossed paths with Terry Riley's A Rainbow in Curved Air. This sidelong work from 1969, running close to 20 minutes, outlined genres that had not yet been named. CBS recorded it for the Music of Our Time series, making it the label's first release to use an 8-track recorder. Riley performed every part himself, moving between electric organ, electric harpsichord, Dumbeck drum, and tambourine while using overdubs and tape loops to build waves of sound. Structure matters here. 3 sections unfold like a classical concerto, beginning fast, slowing around 6 minutes and 39 seconds, and ending with a rhythm driven by the Dumbeck. Modal scales borrowed from jazz and Hindustani classical music pulse underneath, layered with rapid, sitar-like figures. Influences came from many directions. Jazz pianists Art Tatum, Bud Powell, and Bill Evans shaped Riley's approach, and Evans's 1963 album Conversations with Myself showed how overdubbing could work. Study with Pandit Prannath deepened Riley's immersion in Indian classical traditions. Impact arrived immediately. Pete Townsend borrowed keyboard ideas and even part of the name for Baba O'Reilly. Mike Oldfield drew direct inspiration for Tubular Bells, and the progressive band Curved Air took its name straight from this album. Before Klaus Schulze, Edgar Froese, Kraftwerk, Giorgio Moroder, Brian Eno, Acid House, and Trance, this record existed, and German electronic artists like Tangerine Dream and Schulze built on its model. Billboard later traced its reach from Kraftwerk and Oldfield to Stereolab and Boards of Canada. The BBC used the B-side, Poppy No Good and the Phantom Band, as background music for the original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio series. Even the album's back cover mattered, featuring Riley's poem about a utopian world where work vanished and the Pentagon turned colorful. In 1969, that vision felt imaginary, yet the music itself already pointed forward. Number 6. The Frost. Mystery Man. Rejection set this story in motion. Dick Wagner returned to Houghton Lake, Michigan after a failed audition for Blood, Sweat and Tears in New York, and that disappointment led directly to writing Mystery Man. Early 1969 saw the Frost release it as their first single, and Detroit responded instantly. The album spent 5 straight weeks among the top 3 LPs on WKNR, and packed crowds at the Meadowbrook Theater watched them share stages with MC5 and the Stooges. Outside Michigan, momentum collapsed. Vanguard Records failed to distribute or promote the album nationally, and stores beyond the region never stocked it properly. Wagner brought deep experience. Influenced by Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis Presley, and Jerry Lee Lewis, he had backed Jerry Lee Lewis at a roller rink in 1960 and Roy Orbison at Devil's Lake Pavilion the same year. Mystery Man stayed his favorite Frost song for life, and he later claimed he asked his wife for a divorce after writing it. Vocals carried a Joe Cocker rasp, guitar lines tore forward like Freddie King under pressure, and arrangements leaned toward The Who. Recording quality sounded thin, yet the energy never dipped, and later listeners described it as proto-metal acid fuzz psychedelia. Opening slots followed with Blind Faith, John Mayall, and Three Dog Night during the band's peak year, but promotion beyond Michigan never materialized. A second album mixed live and studio tracks while chasing the MC5's Kick Out the Jams model, and its title song became their only Billboard entry, reaching number 105 in December 1969. Wagner's later career turned legendary through work with Alice Cooper and Lou Reed, and in 2008 the Frost entered the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. Mystery Man remains exactly what it was at birth, a hometown hit that never escaped its borders. Number 5. King Crimson, 21st Century Schizoid Man. January 13th, 1969, brought 5 musicians together in a basement beneath George's Cafe on Fulham Palace Road in West London. By October 10th, that meeting resulted in 21st Century Schizoid Man, a 7.5-minute declaration that defined progressive rock. Rock power collided with jazz freedom and classical discipline. Robert Fripp's guitar and Ian MacDonald's saxophone locked together, Greg Lake pushed vocals through heavy distortion, and Michael Giles drove everything forward while Peter Sinfield controlled stop-start sections with blackout lighting. Lyrics targeted the Vietnam War directly. Sinfield fused schizoid with 21st century to project paranoia, violence, and consumerism into the future, drawing lines like politician's funeral pyre and innocents raped with napalm fire. December 1969 at the Fillmore West added another layer, as Fripp dedicated the song to Vice President Spiro Agnew with sharp irony. Musicians noticed immediately. Steve Hackett saw the band at the Marquee that year and described never hearing anything like it, pointing to its precision and blend of free jazz and rock. Members of Yes dropped by the Speakeasy Club one spring night in 1969 and left stunned. Chart success never followed. The single failed, and the album spent only 1 week at number 21 in the UK. Influence, however, moved fast, shaping the next 50 years of demanding and formally adventurous rock. Yes, Genesis, Rush, and Emerson, Lake, and Palmer built on it, and the reach extended into heavy metal and industrial music through bands like Tool, Mastodon, Opeth, and the Mars Volta. Kanye West sampled it for Power in 2010, and producer S1 explained the choice by recalling his own prog rock background. Bad Religion echoed it with 21st Century Digital Boy in 1990, and Greg Lake reflected in 2013 that King Crimson's European structures and intensity often scared listeners. The original lineup lasted only 2 months after the album's release, yet what emerged from that basement became the genre's Big Bang. John Peel joked in 2006 that playing the album made people look at him with disbelief, but he still called it essential. That judgment held up. Number 4. Captain Beefheart, Trout Mask Replica. 8 months of isolation shaped this record. In 1969, Don Van Vliet, known as Captain Beefheart, kept the Magic Band confined to a small house in the San Fernando Valley, rehearsing 14 hours a day under harsh conditions. Food was scarce, arrests for shoplifting followed, and musicians appeared gaunt from malnutrition. Bill Harkleroad's fingers bled from heavy strings, and drummer John French described living on a cup of beans a day. Observers compared the atmosphere to a cult, even drawing parallels to the Manson family. Van Vliet dominated every aspect of the process, berating players until they broke down or submitted. Then, in March 1969, the band entered Whitney Studios in Glendale and recorded the instrumental tracks for 28 songs in a single 6-hour session. Preparation paid off. Van Vliet overdubbed vocals and horns without headphones, relying on faint sound bleeding through the studio glass. Released June 16, 1969 on Frank Zappa's Straight Records, Trout Mask Replica fused R&B, blues, garage rock, free jazz, and avant-garde composition into something that ignored eras altogether. Most of the album came from piano sketches, despite Van Vliet having no formal training on the instrument. He would find short fragments, and John French painstakingly transcribed and assembled them into complete songs. Commercial response lagged. The album missed US charts and spent 1 week at number 21 in the UK. Critics reacted strongly, with Robert Christgau calling it powerful when played loud during bad moods, and Lester Bangs praising it in Rolling Stone as the most challenging musical experience of the year. Bangs later wrote that it never sat ahead of its time, because it stood outside time entirely. John Peel described it as a true work of art, and later ranked it the best pop album ever made. Rolling Stone placed it at number 60 on its greatest albums list in 2003, and in 2010 the Library of Congress added it to the National Recording Registry. Influence spread more through attitude than imitation, reaching Tom Waits, PJ Harvey, Johnny Rotten, Pere Ubu, The Residents, and Japanese noise bands like the Boredoms and Ruins. Tom Waits summed it up best by saying, "Beefheart stains you like coffee or blood once you hear him." Captain Beefheart died December 17, 2010, and the album Forged Through Psychological Pressure remains one of rock's most demanding statements. The pattern connections emerge when these songs sit side by side. The Frost dominated Detroit while distribution failed nationally, the Stooges received little support from Elektra, and Motherlode collapsed just after its hit. Captain Beefheart challenged listeners beyond comfort. Terry Riley worked in a language few understood, and King Crimson unsettled audiences with sheer intensity. None of these songs failed because of quality. Distance from the mainstream caused the problem, along with distribution gaps, rigid radio formats, and listeners unprepared for what they heard. Commercial success never guided these recordings. Influence did. Seeds took root, artists influenced other artists, and templates formed that later generations followed. The cultural context. By 1969, optimism from the early 60s faded. The Manson murders shattered the peace and love image, Vietnam dominated headlines, and the music industry shifted from singles toward albums and from AM to FM radio. Regional scenes thrived independently. Detroit, San Francisco, and London each pushed forward with distinct sounds, and audiences did not always keep pace with that momentum. Technology advanced at the same time. 16-track recording opened doors, and artists like Frank Zappa and Terry Riley walked straight through them. Experimentation defined the moment. Some ideas found acceptance quickly, while others waited decades for recognition. These 10 songs from 1969 arrived without fanfare. The Stooges sold modestly, Peaches on Regalia failed in America, Motherlode disbanded months after a hit, Terry Riley puzzled listeners, The Frost stayed trapped in Detroit, King Crimson unsettled crowds, and Captain Beefheart operated outside any era. What followed reshaped music entirely. Punk, progressive rock, electronic music, heavy metal, and industrial sounds all trace roots back to these overlooked recordings. Recognition came late. I Want to Be Your Dog climbed Rolling Stone's rankings, Trout Mask Replica entered the National Recording Registry, The Frost earned Hall of Fame status, and Terry Riley's influence stretched as far as Kraftwerk. Iggy Pop captured the arc best, recalling how audiences once stared in horror during I Want to Be Your Dog. Now they sing every word, and that change says everything. Hidden gems do not need immediate praise, they only need honesty. Sometimes that takes 50 years, and the music never minds waiting.